Doctor Miguel Moraita is a renowned professor at Universidad Central de Madrid. Rizal became a vehement opponent of organized religion after delivering one of his lectures. In response, the church authorities banned the reading of his lectures and excommunicated Moraita for questioning the computation of the age of the universe on the basis of biblical sources, and appeared to impugn the historicity of the deluge in Genesis. He was a significant influence whose conviction that everything, including religion, should be held up to the light of reason, appealed greatly to the young would-be philosopher. When Rizal saw how the situation had turned violent, he was filled with just rage. The pursuit of knowledge should be unrestricted, as demonstrated by his mentor, Moraita. Months later, Rizal penned Pensamiento de un Filipino, which is regarded as the foundation of the Nolime Tangere because it lays out its basic principles. Published in Berlin in 1887, it is an Enlightenment novel to the core. It demonstrates Rizal's contempt for the religious customs and superstitions of the common Indios, as well as his wholesale and unrelenting attack on the role of the friar parish priests in society. The character of Filosofo Tasio represents Rizal's enthusiasm for the spirit of the Enlightenment and intellectual kinship with Voltaire. The excerpt shown describes a church scene in the novel, a scene that can still be seen in thousands of churches throughout the Philippines today. This refutes the widely held belief that Rizal was only opposed to Catholic practices of his time. Rizal saw the friar and his dominance over society as the source of this backwardness. This helps to explain why the Spanish missionary became the most reviled figure in mainstream Philippine history. It was a vicious political assault that would bring the friars to shame.
Benedict Anderson famously defined nation as an imagined community. Anderson believes that a nation is a community socially constructed, imagined by the people who perceive themselves as a part of that group. As they are larger than face-to-face society, communal bond felt by the members are imagined. Benedict Anderson stated that it should be suffice to note that right from the start, the image, wholly new to Filipino writing, of a dinner party being discussed by hundreds of unnamed people who do not know each other in quite different part of Manila in a particular month, a particular decade, immediately conjured up an imagined community. And in the phrase, a house of Anluwag Street, which we shall describe in such a way that it may be recognized, the would-be recognizer are we Filipino readers. So, in the opening scene in Chapter 1, Anderson pointed out the features anonymous people gossiping about one another around the capital Manila, which implore an imagined community, and the narrator addressed future Filipinos. It shows that in one community, people recognize and share same interests. Rizal did not engage in an ideological colonial society but also envisioned a society where he and his readers belong. Rizal dedicated his novel to his hometown, desiring its sovereignty. The novel's social critique reflects the author's moreover sense of nation, while simultaneously acting as a tool for the readers to place themselves within that nation. According to Howe, Rizal's invention of national community is anchored in his narrative project of forging out of the vicissitude of Spanish colonial rule the concept of modern nationhood. Rizal's work, according to Howe, helped to establish a recognizable Filipino community that was unique from and distinct from Spain, through the creation of a narrative that defines the new community in terms of time and location. The narrative depicts a particular society as a microcosm of Philippine society while locating the realities of that society within the larger story of human progress. Rizal's novel insert the fact of one society into the larger narrative of human civilization. Howe also pointed that the very act of constructing a Filipino community as knowable is never just a matter of artistic imagination, but an ethical and political decision to speak of the Philippines to fellow Filipinos. Rizal observed that there have been a change in 1884 from latitude of 1883, probably because of the stellar example of artists like Luna that revealed the power and the patriotism of the colony. Rizal used a metaphor of the molecules in the end of his speech that prefigured the future project of La Liga Filipina. The way he ended it was deep and thorough. He deliberately chose his words. Techniques was deft and strong, which drew the audience's attention. However, Rizal returned to the metaphor of the molecules 7 years after reaching the conclusion that it is useless to work in Europe because of the Filipinos' disunity. Written during the period 1885 to 1887, the Noli Me Tangere was put together in the 3 different countries, half of the Madrid, a fourth in Paris, and the remainder in Germany. Dedication of Noli is dated Europa 1886, almost certainly when Rizal was in Germany. Rizal appreciated so much from his stay in German village, where Rizal flatly denied to the assumption that Noli's anti-Catholic was influenced by Protestant Germany. He argues that his encounter with Protestant pastor in Germany had softened the novel's viciousness against the friars. Rizal met a pastor who is being able to get well with the Catholic priest in the area, which is not possible in the Philippines at that time because of the dominant belief that only the friars were the only true purveyors of the words of God. In the last fourth of the novel, ambiguity entered the picture regarding the Philippine social problem, and doubt are cast on the philosophy of progress. Rizal's focus shifts from the friars to the Filipino themselves, faced with social cancer. Rizal left for Germany February 1, 1886, and Rizal encountered German social science that this was a body of knowledge to which he would turn to shape the contour of Filipino nation community he was in the process of conjuring. And Rizal would use this amount of information to mold the characteristic of the Filipino nation community that he was creating. Contrasting images, the friar as culture hero. Nick Joaquin mentioned 2 friars that evangelized the Philippines. Franciscan Pedro Bautista came to the Philippines during the Conquista, built the first church in San Francisco del Monte, reached southern Luzon, and dashed off to the new frontiers in Japan, where he was martyred, is now honored on the altar as saint. Then the Dominican Francisco de Capillas explored the wilds of Cagayan, evangelized the north, built and baptized, then went off. There the perils of China is now honored on the altar as a martyr. Joaquin pointed out that friar also played an earthier role in our history than as missionary, and could just as well be portrayed with wheel and seedling as with cross.
Now let's move on to the next topic, which is about the ways of reading the Noli Me Tangere. But before that, let's have a little background about it. Rizal began writing the Noli Me Tangere in 1885, so probably within the first quarter of the year. In a letter to his mother early that year, he denied having violated his father's prohibition to write on political topics, although he did admit having written one article under a pseudonym. So iyang gideny nga iyang gi-violate ang prohibition si iyang papa nga magsulat about politics. So although nag-admit siya nga nakasulat siya og isa ka article under a pseudonym or alias. So soon after, there came a prohibition from his father to return to the Philippines until further notice. So Rizal, who had been looking forward to coming home, must have begun writing the newly soon after. So imbis nga gibawalan siya siyang papa nga magsulat about politics, he was going to write a political novel. So imbis pod nga giprohibitan siya sa iyang papa to return home for the time being, he was going to craft a work that would make his critics brand him all the more as dangerous. So does this mean a disobedient Rizal? So it is more likely a Rizal acting according to his conscience for the country. Rizal tells us that half the novel was written in Spain and the other half in France and Germany. So he finished writing the novel on February 21, 1887, so shortly before midnight, as he himself noted at the end of the manuscript. So it took him a little over 2 years to complete the novel, with many stops in between. There are at least 2 ways of reading the Noli Me Tangere. So the first one is as a literary work. This way of reading is fundamental because the Noli is a literary work. The way it communicates to the reader follows the rules and conventions of works of literature. The second way is to read it as a historical document. This way of reading is also fundamental because while the Noli fresh off the press in 1887 was certainly a work addressed to Filipinos of that time and could not therefore be considered historical. Today, more than 130 years after it was published, it is certainly historical in the sense of belonging to the past. So to read it as a historical document means to read it for the light it throws on Filipinos and the Philippines from 1885 to 1887, the years it was written. So the Rizal proposed a third way implied in one of the reasons for its enactment. So it states that, whereas the life, works, and writings of his Rizal, particularly his novels Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, are a constant inspiring source of patriotism with which the minds of the youth, especially during their formative and decisive years in school, should be suffused. So for the Noli to be an inspiring source of patriotism to the youth, its relevance to the present, if such it has, must be grasped. Otherwise, it remains a historical document locked up in the past. The search for the knowledge relevance to the present demands a third way of reading it. The reader, while reading it as both a literary text and a historical document, must also be on the alert to spot if Filipinos of the 21st century are beset with the same social cancer that Filipinos of the late 19th century, with their distinctive problems, issues, and social and political situation, suffered from. So if you're reading Noli Me Tangere, dapat attentive ka on the social cancer of the past and identify if exist pa ba siya karon. So if the reader does conclude that the same social cancer exists today, he must ask why, and following results dedication to the Noli, how the cancer might be extirpated. How to read the Noli? So the first one is, do not expect its story or plot to be a page turner. If you do, you will be bound to be disappointed. So Rizal himself claims that everything in the novel is based on reality. Whatever the source of the Noli's story, Rizal was clearly determined not to be changed to the narration of it. The plot of the Noli is interrupted again and again. The second one is, do not look for psychologically developed characters. So the Noli's characters are closer to types or archetypes. Psychologically developed characters, on the other hand, are individuals. The third one is, be on the alert for social criticism or social commentary. So for the purposes of this book, social criticism refers to explicit criticism of society, while social commentary refers to the criticism of society implicit in the way society is portrayed. So Rizal's main vehicle for social criticism is the narrator of the novel with his side remarks and digressions and use of irony or sarcasm. On the other hand, Rizal's main vehicle for social commentary is his character types, his portrayal of colonial and rural society, and the consequences of the actions of his characters. 4. Pay attention to discussions of political or social topics. Such discussions occur between Ibarra and the schoolmaster, Ibarra and Filosopo Tasio and Di Filippo, and Ibarra and Elias. 5. Be on the alert for patterns of events and characters, because these patterns reveal themes. 6. Be on the alert for passages of costumbrismo. So costumbrismo was a literary genre popular in Spain and its colonies in the 19th century, depicting everyday life among ordinary people in ordinary settings. So the passages of costumbrismo in the Noli are an exile's recollections of life in the Philippines and are suffused with nostalgic affection. So today, the costumbrista passages in the Noli have become especially valuable because they record customs that are slowly disappearing. Lastly, if you wish to know exactly what Rizal wanted his readers to take away from the Noli, then you have to take the dedication and epigraph of the novel seriously. The Noli Me Tangere in the original Spanish is a delight to read. In many places, it is humorous, sometimes sarcastic, often ironic. However, this is lost to some extent in English translations. The Noli in English can be heavy-handed, dull, and flat. This is not the fault of translators. It is simply the difference between Spanish and English. The change in language is especially lamentable when the part translated is emotional. So, the Tagalog translations fare better since Tagalog is friendlier to emotion. In the end, what translations have difficulty capturing, whether English or Tagalog, is the changes of tone within a chapter and sometimes within a paragraph, especially when they are subtle. It is not usually possible to read the Noli in its entirety in a course on Rizal's life and works, if only because of the sheer volume of other materials the student should read in the limited time available. So here are the two lists of chapters, one long and the other short, that one may read to form an idea of the various themes of Rizal's novel. When reading a chapter, you should read the Noli like someone reading a novel for leisure. Do not read it as though you were reading a textbook, making a mental effort to understand and analyze what you read. As with any novel, try your best to reconstruct the world of the novel in your imagination and enter it. The Noli is about our own country but in a different historical period. There will therefore be a mixture of familiar and the strange. It helps if, when you encounter something familiar, you try to discover whether there is something strange about it. And conversely, when you encounter something strange, you try to discover whether there is something familiar about it.